What if doing the right thing made you the villain? That question haunted me. Not because I didn't know the answer, but because I did. I lived it. And once you see how people react to truth, how they celebrate comfort and kill clarity, you start to question everything you thought was good. There was a time I believed in doing the right thing. I followed the rules, helped people who didn't ask for help, forgave without apology, and stayed quiet when I should have spoken. I thought being kind would heal others. I thought being soft made me strong. I thought the world would notice goodness and respond with love. But I was wrong. The more I gave, the more they took. The more I forgave, the more they hurt me. They didn't want light. They wanted control. And when I stood there holding on to my so-called angel, my kindness, my values, my self-sacrifice, they laughed. They saw weakness. They didn't want an angel. They wanted a demon they could fear, follow, or fight, something to define themselves against. So I changed, not overnight. It started with silence, then distance, then clarity. That's when the old part of me began to die, slowly, quietly. But I still held on, thinking maybe someone would notice the angel was fading. No one did. So I killed it, not in anger, not in hate. I let it go. I buried the soft voice inside that kept asking me to please everyone. And I let the other voice speak, the one that had been warning me all along. Now they say I've changed. They say I'm cold, calculated, distant. But I know the truth. They didn't want the angel. They never did. They made their choice. I just gave them what they asked for. It looked perfect on the outside. Polished streets, smiling faces, polite nods, fake apologies. People dressed well, spoke softly, pretended to care. But underneath, everything stank. There was jealousy behind compliments. There was rage behind silence. People shook hands with one another while sharpening knives behind their backs. No one said what they meant. They just smiled and waited for the right moment to strike. That was the world I knew. They claimed to want peace. They said they wanted kindness, fairness, understanding. But their actions told a different story. They didn't reward honesty. They punished it. They didn't support kindness. They used it. Every time someone tried to be real, they were mocked. Every time someone stood up for what's right, they were isolated. Peace was never their goal. Control was. And chaos gave them that control. It gave them something to blame, something to fix, something to point fingers at. So when peace tried to walk in, they shut the door and smiled, like it never knocked. I used to think being good meant being quiet. That being good meant never making anyone uncomfortable, even when they were wrong. That being good meant shrinking, apologizing, giving more than I could afford. That was the angel in me. Soft, gentle, patient, always forgiving, always hoping, always breaking silently behind closed doors. I thought the angel was strength, but it was tired, it was confused, and worst of all, it was lying to itself. Then I saw the truth. The people who rose weren't angels. They were loud, bold, sometimes cruel. They didn't wait for permission. They didn't water themselves down to be accepted. They acted, and the world adjusted, not because they were better, but because they were seen. The angel inside me whispered to stay calm, stay kind, stay humble. But outside, I watched those with sharp tongues and hard hands climb higher, be praised, be followed. I couldn't ignore it anymore. And that's when the demon appeared, not as some evil force, but as a voice that asked questions the angel never would. Why are you still quiet? Why are you still giving? Why are you still trying to fix what they keep breaking on purpose? That voice wasn't cruel. It was honest. It didn't flatter me. It didn't beg me to hold on. It just pointed at the facts and let me decide what I wanted to do with them. The angel stood for everything I was told to be. The demon stood for everything I was told to avoid. But the more I listened, the more I understood. The angel kept me liked. The demon kept me alive. The angel got me praise. The demon gave me power, and not the kind of power that crushes people, but the kind that keeps you from being crushed. The world kept pretending, and I kept seeing through it. Behind every act of kindness, there was a price. Behind every apology, a strategy. People didn't want to be better. They wanted to look better. They wanted to win. The angel in me said love wins, but love wasn't even invited to the fight. So I started asking myself, who am I really helping? Them? Or the version of me they created to feel comfortable? The angel said, stay. The demon said, leave. And I started listening. They said they wanted truth, said they respected honesty, said they admired people who stood up for what's right. But they lied. They didn't want virtue. They wanted entertainment. They wanted noise. They wanted someone to blame when things went wrong, and someone to tear down when things went right. The world didn't punish evil. It punished weakness. And in their eyes, kindness was weakness. Integrity was a joke. Morals were a costume. Everywhere I looked, the same pattern repeated. People who manipulated others climbed fast. The ones who shouted loudest were heard first. The ones who pretended to care were trusted more than those who actually did. The more I tried to do things the right way, the more invisible I became. I was playing by rules no one respected. The angel in me kept reminding me to stay grounded, to not lose myself. But I was tired of watching frauds win, tired of watching cruelty praised as confidence, tired of sitting still while everything I believed in was being laughed at. The angel inside me stood for patience, humility, grace. But those things didn't work in this world. People didn't respond to gentle correction. They responded to pressure. They didn't listen to quiet logic. They listened to threats. They didn't care how much truth you carried. They only cared how much noise you made with it. So I started questioning what I was doing, who I was trying to protect, why I was holding myself back when no one else was playing fair. The people around me didn't want to grow. They wanted to feel right. They wanted to win arguments, not understand each other. The angel kept telling me to stay calm, to be the example. But that example was being trampled on, being stepped over, and no one cared. Then something shifted. I noticed how quickly people turned on virtue when it became inconvenient, when doing the right thing meant losing money, losing control, losing popularity. They dropped it without hesitation. I watched them cheer for people who manipulated others and mocked those who still believed in sincerity. They wanted charm, not character. They wanted a mask that could dance, not a soul that stood still. And they punished anyone who didn't play along. It broke something in me. I started to see the angel not as a symbol of strength, but as a cage. It kept me small, predictable, safe. It told me that if I was good enough, kind enough, soft enough, the world would change. But it didn't. It only got louder, meaner, colder. So the conflict began. I started hearing two voices inside me, one still holding on to hope, still believing in light, in redemption. That voice said, don't change, don't let them win, don't become what you hate. But the other voice, the one I tried to silence for years, began to grow stronger. It said, "Look around. Look how they move. Look how they win. Look how they survive." That voice wasn't cruel. It was alert, awake, watching everything I refused to see before. I used to think the demon was the enemy, that if I ever let it speak, it would destroy me. But that wasn't true. The demon wasn't evil. It was honest. It held all the parts of me I buried to be accepted. My anger, my instinct, my strength. It wasn't trying to ruin me. It was trying to protect me from them, from myself, from the lie I was living. I started to wonder, what if I wasn't meant to be liked? What if I was meant to be real? What if the world didn't need another angel to be ignored, but something else entirely? What if being what they feared was the only way to make them listen? The angel wanted me to keep peace, but the demon wanted me to make impact, and I couldn't serve both. I had to choose. So I started testing the water, speaking up louder, drawing lines, saying no without guilt. It scared people. It shocked them, but it also made them listen. For the first time, they saw me, not the version I created to comfort them, but the version I'd been hiding to protect myself. They hated it, but they also respected it. The same people who ignored my kindness started reacting to my defiance. They didn't like the change, but they couldn't deny it. They called it arrogance, but it wasn't. It was clarity. It was me finally stepping into something real. I wasn't sure if I was becoming what they hated or what they needed. Maybe both. Maybe that was the point. Maybe they didn't need another angel. Maybe they needed someone who could burn without apology. Someone who knew when to stop asking for space and start taking it. It didn't happen in one moment. There was no dramatic snap, no explosion, no loud signal that said, "Now you've changed." It was quieter than that, slower. It happened across years, in conversations that left me drained, in favors I did that were never returned, in apologies I gave for things I didn't do. At first I thought it was just part of life, that people would grow with time, that if I stayed kind, stayed humble, stayed soft, things would get better. But they didn't. Every act of kindness started to feel like a step toward invisibility. People saw what I gave and asked for more. I said yes, thinking one day they'd see me. One day they'd understand. They never did. They saw a resource. They saw a helper. They saw someone they could call when things went wrong, and someone they could forget when things went right. And I kept allowing it, thinking maybe being good meant accepting it. Then the betrayals began, not from strangers, from people I trusted, the ones I thought would protect me like I protected them. They smiled at me and used what I said against me. They twisted my softness into guilt, my empathy into weakness. They wore my patience thin, and when I finally stood up, they called me difficult, selfish, aggressive. I was shocked, hurt, confused. But more than anything, I was tired. The change didn't come from hate. It came from survival. I started to shrink back, not to punish them, but to protect what little was left of me. The angel inside still whispered, "They don't mean it. Be better. Stay kind." But that voice got quieter every day. Not because I stopped caring, but because I couldn't afford to anymore. The cost was too high. At first, I didn't want to believe it. I thought maybe I was becoming bitter. Maybe I was overthinking. Maybe I just needed to try harder. But no matter how hard I tried, the result stayed the same. The more I gave, the more they took. The more I forgave, the more they repeated. And when I began asking for what I needed, I was told I was too much, too emotional, too sensitive. It didn't feel like transformation. It felt like erosion. A slow grinding down of everything I thought was good about myself. I didn't become angry all at once. I became exhausted. The kind of tired that sleep doesn't fix. The kind that settles in your bones and makes your smile feel fake. I smiled anyway. I kept showing up, kept trying, until one day I couldn't. That day didn't look special. It wasn't dramatic. It was just quiet. I woke up and didn't care anymore. I didn't care if they thought I was cold. I didn't care if I disappointed anyone. I didn't care if they left. For the first time, I didn't adjust myself to make someone else comfortable. I said what I meant. I didn't explain it. I didn't apologize. And when the fallout came, I felt peace. The people who stayed were silent, confused, waiting for me to return to the version they liked, the version that made them feel strong without asking them to be kind, the version that forgave everything and demanded nothing. That version was gone. The angel inside didn't die all at once. It starved slowly. Every time I held back to avoid conflict, every time I made excuses for their behavior, every time I swallowed my pain so they wouldn't feel guilty, it faded one sacrifice at a time, until it had no voice left. I never wanted to lose it. I just couldn't carry it anymore. It wasn't protecting me. It was getting me hurt. It wasn't giving me peace. It was making me a target. I used to think selflessness was strength, but it's not strength if no one values it. It's not noble if it's expected and never returned. They say good people always win in the end, but that's not what I saw. I saw loud people win. I saw cruel people win. I saw people who didn't hesitate to say no, to walk away, to defend themselves, rise. I thought I was strong because I could carry so much, but I was just afraid to put anything down, afraid to be called rude, afraid to be seen as someone who didn't care. That fear kept me small. It kept me obedient. And then I looked at myself, really looked, and I didn't recognize who I had become, not because I had changed into someone else, but because I had erased myself trying to meet everyone else's expectations. I was full of things I never asked for: burdens, guilt, silence, people's secrets, people's pain, people's opinions of me. And I was empty of the things I actually needed: rest, boundaries, joy, space, honesty. The transformation wasn't pretty. It wasn't poetic. It was messy, awkward, lonely. I started saying no, and people got angry. I started asking for time, and people said I was distant. I stopped explaining myself, and they said I was cold. But I kept going, not because it felt good, but because I knew going back would feel worse. There were days I missed the angel, missed the comfort of being liked, missed the praise, missed the illusion of harmony. But I reminded myself that harmony built on silence isn't real, that being liked for who you're pretending to be is a form of loneliness too. And I wasn't going back to that. Some people left. Some tried to guilt me. Some tried to fix me. But I didn't bend. I didn't explain. I didn't try to win them over. I let them think what they wanted, because finally, I was thinking for myself. That's when I realized the demon wasn't what they told me it was. It wasn't evil. It wasn't cruel. It was clarity. It was saying no without guilt. It was cutting ties without shame. It was walking away from what broke me without offering one more explanation. It was standing in truth, even when it made people uncomfortable. The angel kept me quiet. The demon taught me how to speak. The angel begged for peace. The demon demanded self-respect. The angel wanted to be loved. The demon wanted to be free. And I needed both, but not equally, not anymore. I started speaking up, not to argue, Just to be clear, I started choosing rest without explanation. I stopped overgiving to people who saw me as a backup plan. I deleted messages I didn't want to answer. I walked away from conversations that drained me. And I didn't feel guilty. I felt real. The people who truly cared understood. They didn't need the angel version of me to stay. They adjusted to the real one. The rest, they faded or tried to fight. But I didn't fight back. I just stayed firm. I chose my peace over their comfort. It wasn't easy. It still isn't. But it's honest. And I'd rather be misunderstood for being honest than loved for being fake. I'm still learning. Still healing. Still letting go of parts of me I thought I needed to survive. But one thing is clear. The world didn't force me to become cruel. It forced me to become clear. There's a difference. I didn't kill the angel because I hated it. I let it go because it couldn't protect me anymore. I needed something stronger. Something that didn't ask permission to exist. Something that didn't apologize for outgrowing who I used to be. Something that looked like strength and sounded like truth. And when I stopped fighting that voice, everything made sense. I wasn't becoming a monster. I was becoming whole. It wasn't one betrayal. It was the final one. You always think the worst pain will come from enemies. From people who openly dislike you. But it rarely does. The worst pain comes from people you let in. The ones who looked you in the eye and said, "I'd never hurt you." That's the kind of wound that doesn't bleed on the outside. It cuts in silence, and it doesn't heal with time. It heals with truth. There was a friend I thought of as family. We didn't grow up together, but it felt like we had. Shared everything. Talked for hours. Lifted each other through things no one else even knew about. I let my guard down with them. Let them see the pieces I didn't show anyone else. I was honest, vulnerable, loyal. I didn't think twice about it. That's what real friendship was supposed to be, wasn't it? But I started noticing things. The silence when I needed support. The short answers when I tried to open up. The way they laughed a little too hard when someone else made a joke at my expense. I brushed it off. Told myself I was being sensitive. I had done that my whole life, second-guessed my own pain, made excuses for people who didn't deserve them. And I did it again, until I heard what they said about me. Not from strangers, from someone they didn't know I still spoke to. Nothing dramatic, nothing that would make a headline, but enough to shift everything. They called me weak, said I was too emotional. Said they only stuck around because they felt sorry for me. The same person who cried on my shoulder now acted like I was the burden. It hit harder than anything else had. Because I hadn't expected it. Because I still cared. I didn't confront them, not at first. I sat with it, let it sink in, ran every memory back in my head. Every late-night talk, every message. Every time I defended them when others questioned their loyalty. I felt stupid, but more than that I felt betrayed. Not just by them, by myself. Because I saw the signs, I ignored them. I wanted to believe the angel in me would be enough to keep the people I loved close. The internal debate started that night. The angel said it could be a misunderstanding, that people speak from pain. That maybe they were just venting and didn't mean it. That I should give them a chance to explain. That loyalty meant staying, even when it hurt. The angel reminded me of all the good moments. All the times we laughed. All the promises made. The demon, though, the demon didn't speak with rage. It spoke with calm, with facts. It reminded me of patterns. Of how many times I'd excused disrespect in the name of empathy. How often I had let people hurt me just because I loved them. It didn't ask me to hate them. It asked me to stop lying to myself. It asked me to stop calling wounds lessons and start calling them what they were. Open cuts caused by people who were never truly with me. The angel still fought, said forgiveness was strength, said cutting people off was cruel, said I could fix it, that maybe I was overreacting, that if I just reached out and talked, it would all go back to normal. But the demon was patient, and this time I listened. The conversation played in my head for days. What would I say? Would I let them know I knew? Would I let them explain? Would I scream? Would I cry? I did none of that. When the moment came, it was quiet. I just walked away, blocked the number, deleted the messages, didn't give them a final word, didn't leave a door open. I chose silence. Not to be cruel, but because I finally realized they didn't deserve an audience with my pain. That was the moment everything changed. Not because they betrayed me, but because I finally believed myself. I believed what I saw. I stopped justifying what I heard. I stopped assuming the best in people who had shown me the worst. The angel begged me to reconsider, but I couldn't. Not anymore. I started looking at more than just that one person. I looked at the patterns in my life, the way I bent for others who never bent for me, the way I showed up when I was breaking, while others disappeared when things got hard. I started counting all the times I forgave people who never even said sorry. I couldn't keep doing it. I couldn't keep bleeding for people who wouldn't even hand me a bandage. I wasn't angry anymore. I was done, and there's a difference. The angel wasn't built for this world. It wanted to see the best in everyone, even if it meant dying a little each day. It valued loyalty over self-respect. It believed love meant sacrifice, even when it wasn't mutual. The demon, though, knew what I had become: a shell, a caretaker of everyone's pain but my own, a punching bag for people's projections, a quiet listener when I needed to scream. They wanted a demon. They made that clear every time they praised the loudest voice in the room, every time they followed someone with sharp words and cold hands, every time they ignored the gentle ones, the sincere ones, the ones who stood quietly in truth. They made their choice. So I made mine. I stopped returning calls that made my stomach turn. I stopped saying yes just to keep peace. I stopped offering parts of myself that were never appreciated. I cut ties, not because I hated them, but because I finally loved me. I let go of friendships I had outgrown. I distanced myself from people who only came around when they needed something, and I stopped feeling guilty about it. The angel kept whispering that I was being harsh, that I was isolating myself, that people would misunderstand. But the demon reminded me, what they misunderstood was who I was to begin with. They never saw me. They saw what I gave, what I allowed. And once that stopped, so did their loyalty. There's nothing more honest than silence. Once I stopped explaining myself, I saw who still respected me. Once I stopped offering my energy for free, I saw who was still willing to show up. And the list was short, but it was real. I didn't turn into something dark. I stopped pretending I was light. That's not the same thing. I started owning the anger I buried for years, the frustration I masked with smiles, the boundaries I denied myself in the name of keeping others close. I started naming what hurt, and I didn't flinch when people called it selfish. They wanted a demon, not because they admired evil, but because they feared strength, because strength doesn't apologize for existing, because it doesn't beg to be kept, because it says, if you can't value me, you don't get access to me. That kind of clarity terrifies people who benefit from your confusion. I wasn't cruel. I was clear. I didn't become cold. I became conscious. I didn't stop caring. I stopped carrying what wasn't mine. The angel fought hard to stay. Even after all the pain, it still wanted to believe, still wanted to forgive, still wanted to fix everything. But it was tired, starving, and I was tired of trying to keep it alive. So I let it go, gently, silently, with respect. I didn't kill it in anger. I ended its suffering, and when it was gone, I didn't cry. I felt still, like I had finally stopped betraying myself. There was a silence after the shift, a kind of stillness I wasn't used to. I had spent so much of my life reacting, adjusting, apologizing. Then suddenly I wasn't doing any of that. I wasn't explaining myself to people who didn't care to understand. I wasn't chasing approval from people who only respected control, and it felt strange. Not peaceful, not yet, just quiet. The new version of me didn't arrive with fanfare. It came with boundaries, with decisions made without permission, with long pauses between texts and a sharper tone when I finally replied. I started to say no without a reason. I stopped softening my voice to be less threatening. I let the silence sit when people said things I disagreed with. It unsettled them. I could see it. They didn't know how to handle the absence of the person they once leaned on, the one who made excuses for their behavior, the one who smiled even when she was hurting. That person was gone. The reactions were mixed. Some called me arrogant. Some said I'd changed. Some stopped reaching out entirely, waiting for me to return to the version they were comfortable with. But I didn't. I couldn't. That version of me wasn't acting anymore. She was exhausted. She had burned herself trying to be enough for everyone. The one who stood in her place now was not pretending. She was done asking for a seat at a table built to break her. I started moving differently, with intention. I didn't chase opportunities. I created them. I didn't wait for permission to speak. I said what needed to be said, when it needed to be said. People noticed. They didn't always like it, but they noticed, and something strange happened. The more I stopped pleasing others, the more they seemed drawn to me. The same people who used to ignore me now wanted to understand me. The ones who used to take without giving started offering. I didn't trust it. Not right away. I wasn't interested in the spotlight. I just didn't want to disappear anymore. With this version of me came recognition, promotions, praise, visibility. People said I was bold, confident, clear. They didn't know the cost. They didn't see the years I spent quieting myself to be accepted. They didn't see the tears behind the decisions. The nights spent doubting whether I was too harsh, too cold, too far gone. They saw results. They called it strength. But I knew it wasn't strength that brought me here. It was survival. There's a strange kind of success that follows when you finally stop betraying yourself. You start doing things you once thought were selfish. You put your needs first. You speak your truth without fear. And people notice. Not just the ones who loved the old you, but the ones who feared the version you're becoming. They know you can no longer be controlled. That scares them, but it also commands respect. I started walking into rooms with my head up, not to intimidate, just to take up the space I used to shrink from. I stopped asking if I was allowed to be here. I knew I was. Not because someone said so, but because I decided I was done making myself small. But success came with its own silence, not the kind that heals, the kind that echoes. I looked around and realized how many people I had to leave behind to stand this tall. Some of them left on their own, others I pushed away. And though I didn't regret it, the emptiness still sat with me. Strength can be loud, but it's also lonely. The praise felt hollow at times. I would get messages from people saying I inspired them, that my words woke something up in them. I thanked them. I meant it. But inside, I felt distant, because they were seeing the finished cut. They didn't see the edits, the cuts that didn't make it to the surface, the breakdowns, the grieving, the mourning of a self I had carried for decades. I was still carrying it, in pieces. People think strength is loud, that it roars, breaks doors, shakes foundations. Sometimes it does, but most days it's quiet. It's making coffee while your heart still aches. It's going to work when your soul is tired. It's showing up, even when you're full of doubt. It's choosing not to respond to people who want the old version of you back. That's not applause. That's grit. I wasn't at war with the world anymore, but I wasn't fully at peace either. There was a restlessness, a question that kept returning. Was I free, or just wearing a better mask? I looked stronger, spoke clearer, made choices faster. But was that clarity, or just armor? There were moments where the old softness tried to come back, a conversation that made me hesitate, a face from the past that reminded me who I used to be. And for a second I wanted to go back, to reach out, to explain, to fix. But I didn't, because I remembered what it cost, and I wasn't willing to pay that price again. Still, part of me missed it, the part that felt everything too deeply, that cried at songs, that forgave too quickly, that believed too easily. I didn't kill her because I hated her. I let her go because I needed to. But sometimes I wish I could tell her I'm sorry, that I didn't protect her better, that I thought being her would be enough. This new self I became, she was powerful, but she was still learning, still healing, still trying to find balance between being bold and being whole, between setting boundaries and keeping her heart open, between protecting peace and building trust. It's not easy, especially when people want to believe that once you become strong, the pain stops. It doesn't. It just becomes quieter, more private. I had days where I questioned everything. Was I too harsh? Too guarded? Did I cut off people too soon? Did I lose something I can never get back? And then I'd remember all the times I stayed too long, gave too much, let people stay who should have left. That was my answer. It didn't matter if I was perfect now. It mattered that I wasn't betraying myself anymore. There's a kind of confidence that grows in silence, the kind that doesn't need to be announced, the kind that walks into a room and doesn't ask to be noticed. That's who I was becoming. Not someone who had it all figured out, but someone who could finally sit with their pain without hiding from it.
I still felt everything. I still cared, but I didn't let those feelings run my life anymore. They were guests, not rulers. I allowed myself to miss people, but I didn't chase them. I allowed myself to feel lonely, but I didn't settle. I allowed myself to hurt, but I didn't break. That was the difference. That was the growth. Some nights I still sat with the silence, with the echoes of who I used to be. I didn't rush them away. I let them stay. Not to haunt me, but to remind me of how far I had come, of how much I survived, of the strength it took to stop pleasing, stop fixing, stop shrinking. They said I had become a demon, cold, distant, ruthless. Maybe I had, but if that meant finally standing in truth, I accepted it. I didn't need to be an angel anymore. I just needed to be real. For the longest time, I believed the angel in me was something sacred, something pure, something worth preserving no matter the cost. It wore patience like armor. It walked softly, spoke gently, loved endlessly. It forgave too fast, tolerated too much, waited too long. It stayed loyal to those who didn't notice. It gave understanding to people who never asked for it. And it kept me small. I didn't see it then, but that version of me wasn't a hero. It was a hostage. They told me the angel was good, that it represented everything admirable. Calm under pressure, smiling in the face of pain, quiet in conflict, strong enough to bend without breaking. They didn't tell me it was also afraid. Afraid of rejection, afraid of confrontation, afraid of being seen as anything other than agreeable. So it shrunk, bit its tongue, said yes when it wanted to say no, and everyone called it strength. But it wasn't strength. It was survival masked as sainthood. It wasn't kindness, it was fear. Fear of not being loved, fear of being misunderstood, fear of being alone. That angel didn't protect me. It pacified everyone else. It served peace at the expense of truth. It said things were okay when they weren't. It kept the room comfortable by sacrificing its voice. The angel said, "Don't be selfish." So I kept giving until I had nothing left. The angel said, "Be humble." So I dismissed my own achievements and let others take credit. The angel said, "People mean well." So I let them stay long after they stopped caring. That kind of goodness isn't pure, it's dangerous. It teaches you that love is earned by erasing yourself. It tells you that boundaries are barriers and that silence is noble. That's not morality. That's self-neglect in disguise. And then came the part no one prepared me for. The demon didn't arrive with flames. It didn't scream or slam doors. It whispered, not in anger, but with reason. It said, "Why are you still pretending?" And for the first time, I didn't have an answer. It wasn't chaos, it was clarity. It didn't come to destroy, it came to wake me up. The demon didn't wear masks, it didn't soften truths, it didn't comfort people who chose to misunderstand. It told me to stop editing myself for people who'd never do the same for me. The angel wanted to be loved, the demon wanted to be respected. And respect doesn't come from silence, it comes from truth. Even when it's sharp, even when it's messy, even when it makes people uncomfortable. The demon wasn't heartless, it just had standards. It didn't ask me to stop caring, it asked me to care with discernment. It told me not everyone deserved access, that not every person who clapped for me wanted me to win. The world tells you to be soft, but it rewards power. It tells you to be kind, but it listens to confidence. It praises vulnerability in theory, but weaponizes it in practice. So when you act like the angel, they applaud, but only because you're easy to control. When you become the demon, they pause. They label you difficult, arrogant, dangerous. But underneath the discomfort is a strange respect, because they can't use you anymore. They can't guilt you. They can't predict you. And that unsettles them. People don't really want saints, they want servants. They want someone who will nod when they speak, someone who won't challenge their ego, someone who won't walk away when mistreated. The angel fit that mold perfectly, but the demon shattered it. And that's when things shifted. I started calling things what they were: manipulation, gaslighting, disrespect. I stopped softening blows that others didn't hesitate to land. I called out fake apologies, empty promises, half-truths. I said no when I meant no. Not later, not maybe, just no. And suddenly the people who once loved the angel said I was cold, harsh, unforgiving. But I knew better. I wasn't unkind, I was tired. Tired of twisting myself into a shape that made others feel tall. Tired of explaining things that should have been obvious. Tired of making excuses for people who never made any effort. The demon taught me that self-respect sometimes looks like selfishness to people who benefited from your self-neglect. I stopped rescuing people from their own consequences. I let them sit in the discomfort they created. I let them misunderstand me without rushing to clarify. I let the silence speak, not out of pettiness, but out of peace. I had spent years trying to be understandable, trying to be soft enough to love and strong enough to save everyone. That duality was killing me. What no one tells you is that the angel is tired too. It looks graceful, but it's aching. It smiles, but it's screaming. It bends because it has no other choice, because the world taught it that survival means submission. The demon, though, it doesn't beg. It doesn't plead. It doesn't ask for crumbs. It takes up space. It says, "This is who I am. Take it or leave." And that's where the twist hits hardest. You think the angel is the goal, but it's the beginning. You think the demon is the fall, but it's the rise. That shift forces you to ask, who has been in control this whole time? You or the version of you shaped by the world? Have your decisions been rooted in truth or in fear of how you'll be perceived? Are you living or are you performing? The demon didn't save me. It reminded me I didn't need saving. I needed remembering. I needed to remember the power I buried to be liked, the voice I silenced to keep peace, the limits I abandoned to stay needed. It was all there, covered by years of conditioning, guilt, and expectations. They told me goodness looks like selflessness, but they never told me selflessness without boundaries becomes self-erasure. They told me strength looks like silence, but they never told me silence becomes complicity. They told me love looks like sacrifice, but they never told me sacrifice without reciprocity becomes self-abuse. So I questioned everything, not just the people around me, but the system that taught me who to be. Teachers, family, society, mentors, everyone praised the angel, but no one asked if she was happy. No one asked if she felt safe. They were just grateful she wasn't causing trouble. The demon caused trouble, but it also caused change. People started acting differently, not just around me, but around themselves. They began checking their tone, respecting my time, asking before assuming, not because I demanded it, but because I reflected it. That's the paradox. When you respect yourself, people either rise to meet you or fall away, and both are answers. The demon gave me permission to take care of myself, to say, I matter too. It didn't make me mean. It made me honest. It made me whole. It made me stop asking the world for permission to exist. It made me realize I was the author, not the character. You start to feel power in places you once felt panic. Saying no doesn't shake you. Being misunderstood doesn't paralyze you. Walking away doesn't crush you. You stop managing people's perceptions and start protecting your peace. That's not cruelty. That's alignment. The more I listened to that voice, the clearer things became. I stopped seeking validation from broken places. I stopped bleeding for people who were holding the knife. I stopped proving my worth to people who never earned access. And for the first time, I felt grounded. Not just seen, but real. The twist isn't that the demon replaced the angel. It's that they were never enemies. They were both parts of me, just born in different times. The angel came first because I needed to survive, but the demon arrived when I was ready to live. They'll call it rebellion, bitterness, a phase. Let them. Labels don't define you. Integrity does. And the most honest thing you'll ever do is refuse to be anyone other than yourself. Fully, unapologetically, clearly. I thought being good meant never hurting anyone. Now I know being good means not hurting myself to protect others. I thought love meant giving everything. Now I know love starts with giving to yourself. I thought silence was strength. Now I know truth is. The world doesn't want angels. It wants obedience. When you stop performing, they panic. But that panic is not your responsibility. You were never meant to carry their comfort. You were meant to carry your truth. The demon didn't kill the angel. It freed it from guilt, from silence, from shame, from pretending. It didn't destroy me. It revealed me. And in that revelation, I found the one thing I'd been looking for all along. Not perfection, not approval, but power. Quiet, honest, unshakable power. Maybe it's time to stop apologizing for your strength. Maybe it's time to stop diluting who you are just to be understood by people who never cared to really see you in the first place. Maybe you've been shrinking for so long, you've forgotten what it feels like to take up space. Real space. The kind that doesn't ask for permission. The kind that doesn't soften itself for the comfort of others. You were taught to be small, to stay quiet, to keep the peace, even if it cost your sanity. You were told that being good meant being liked, and that being liked meant being easy to deal with. But being easy doesn't build truth. It builds resentment. It builds regret. And worst of all, it builds a life that looks nothing like you. So here's the question you've been avoiding. Who are you when you stop performing? When you stop people-pleasing, stop sugarcoating, stop bending? Who's left when the mask drops? That version of you, the one you buried beneath years of guilt and fear. That's the real you, the one who sees clearly, the one who's not afraid to speak when silence is expected, the one who says no without explaining. That version of you isn't cruel. It's clean. It's honest. It's necessary. You've been carrying a fake angel for too long. The angel that says, "I'm fine," when you're breaking. That smiles when your soul is screaming. That hugs people who keep stabbing you emotionally and then says, "Maybe they didn't mean it." That angel isn't noble. It's a lie, a well-practiced one, a survival tactic. It helped you once, yes, but now it's keeping you from living. You're not soft anymore. You're tired. Tired of being the bigger person. Tired of being the one who always understands. Tired of bending your values so others can feel powerful in your silence. They told you it was strength, but it was surrender. And you've surrendered long enough. This isn't about becoming heartless. It's about becoming whole. It's about understanding that love without self-respect is not love. It's addiction. That loyalty to people who disrespect your boundaries isn't loyalty. It's fear. That silence in the face of abuse isn't peace. It's complicity. You have a responsibility now, not to them, to yourself, to protect what you know, to speak your truth, to stop apologizing for how much you've grown. You don't owe anyone the soft version of you, especially not the ones who only respected you when you were quiet, compliant, controllable. If someone leaves because you told the truth, let them go. If someone thinks you've changed, good. That's the point. Growth is supposed to make people uncomfortable, especially the ones who benefit from your discomfort. There will be moments when you miss the old version of you, the one who made everyone else comfortable, the one who gave second, third, and 10th chances, the one who stayed in places long after you were no longer respected. That version of you felt easier to carry, but that version of you was dying inside. Every time you said yes when you wanted to say no, every time you let someone walk over you just to keep the connection, every time you stayed quiet when your heart begged you to speak. Let that version rest now. Thank it for getting you this far, then bury it and walk away. You were never meant to be the angel they created in their minds. You were meant to be real, raw, honest, strong. You were meant to say what needed to be said, even if your voice shook. You were meant to make waves, and if that makes people uncomfortable, let them adjust or let them leave. But don't you shrink again. They asked for a demon. I gave them me.